Take that metal off right now. The command sliced through the cool morning air so sharply that even the pigeons near the courthouse steps fluttered away. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Coffee cups paused halfway to lips. Heads turned in perfect unison toward the voice and then toward the woman it targeted. Evelyn Carter stood at the edge of the Memorial Plaza with one gloved hand resting over a small bronze medal pinned neatly to her navy coat. She was 58 years old, posture straight, shoulders steady, the kind of steady that came from years of carrying more than groceries and rent in silence. The November wind moved through the rows of American flags lining the walkway, making them snap softly like distant applause no one had earned yet. Officer Jason Cole descended the stone steps with the certainty of a man who believed a badge made him the final word in any room. Tall, clean-cut, jaw set hard, he walked past the wreaths and flower stands as if the ceremony itself were an inconvenience placed in his path. His hand pointed directly at the medal on Evelyn's chest. "You heard me," he said louder this time. "Take it off." Evelyn did not move. Around them, families gathered for Veterans Remembrance Day shifted uneasily. A little boy holding his grandfather's hand looked up in confusion. An elderly man in a Marine cap lowered his gaze. A woman with a folded program took one slow step back. Everyone could feel it now, that uncomfortable pressure when pride meets prejudice in public. Evelyn had arrived 20 minutes earlier on the city bus, carrying a paper bag with carnations inside. She always came early. She always stood near the east fountain where the names engraved in black granite caught the first light. She never asked for attention. Most mornings she cleaned floors at the VA hospital downtown, mopping hallways before sunrise, nodding politely to nurses rushing by with clipboards and paper cups. Most people knew her only as Miss Evelyn from housekeeping. None of them knew why her left knee stiffened in cold weather. None of them knew why sudden sirens made her pause and breathe once before continuing. None of them knew the medal had spent 30 years wrapped in an old cotton handkerchief inside a dresser drawer until she took it out this morning with shaking hands. Officer Cole stopped 3 feet in front of her. "That honor is for real service members," he said, loud enough for every phone camera now rising into the air. "Not costumes." A murmur moved through the crowd. Evelyn's eyes lifted to meet his. They were calm eyes, dark and clear, the kind that had seen panic and chosen patience anyway. She glanced once at the medal, then back at him. "It belongs where it is," she said softly. Her voice was low, almost gentle, but it carried farther than his shouting. Cole gave a short laugh that held no humor. "Ma'am, don't make this difficult." He reached toward the pin, fingers already extending. Evelyn stepped back exactly 1 pace. Nothing dramatic, nothing fearful, just enough to protect what had already cost too much. The bells from the courthouse clock began to ring 10 o'clock, each note rolling over the plaza like a warning no one understood yet. The wind lifted the edge of Evelyn's coat, and for a brief second the sunlight struck the bronze medal, making it flash like fire. Officer Jason Cole held his hand in the air for a second longer than necessary, as if the pause itself could prove authority. The plaza had gone so quiet that the rustle of programs and the distant hiss of a city bus sounded unusually loud. Evelyn Carter looked at the hand hovering near her chest, then calmly adjusted the collar of her navy coat as though she were fixing it against the wind rather than protecting anything at all. "Sir," she said, "today is for remembrance." Her tone was respectful, but there was something immovable beneath it, like bedrock under shallow water. Cole squared his shoulders. He was 29, recently promoted, proud of the clean lines of his uniform and the way people usually stepped aside when he approached. He had spent years believing confidence and correctness were the same thing. "Then remember the rules," he replied. "Unauthorized medals are not allowed at official events." Several people exchanged glances. There had been no such announcement. No signs. No barriers. But certainty, spoken loudly enough, often passed for truth. Evelyn's eyes drifted past him to the granite wall beyond the fountain where names were carved in rows so neat they almost looked peaceful. She knew one of those names by touch. Every year, she traced it with 2 fingers before the crowd arrived. This year she had not made it there yet. "Who told you that?" asked a voice from the side. The speaker was the elderly Marine in the faded cap, his cane planted firmly beside polished black shoes. Cole turned, irritated by interruption. "Sir, please step back." I asked a question, the old man said. His voice was thin with age but sharpened by memory. Cole ignored him and focused again on Evelyn. Identification, he said. Now. She reached into her handbag slowly and handed over a worn leather wallet. Inside was a state identification card, a bus pass, and a laminated hospital badge that read Evelyn Carter, Environmental Services. Cole glanced at the badge and let out a breath through his nose. Housekeeping, he said, just loud enough to sting. A few people lowered their eyes. Others looked suddenly interested in the flags. Public embarrassment had a way of recruiting silence. Evelyn took back the wallet without comment. The carnations in her paper bag trembled slightly in the wind. Her hands did not. I clean rooms where men wake up screaming from dreams they cannot escape, she said quietly. I clean floors where families cry good news and bad news on the same day. Work is work, officer. Cole's jaw tightened. He had expected excuses, maybe anger, maybe retreat. He had not expected dignity. That still does not explain the medal. He gestured toward it again. Evelyn studied him for a moment, not with resentment, but with the tired patience of someone who had seen younger people confuse volume for wisdom. No, she said. It explains me. The words landed heavier than shouting. A woman near the back lowered her phone. A teenager stopped recording altogether. Even the boy holding his grandfather's hand seemed to understand that something important had just been said. The courthouse bells finished their final note. Across the street, traffic halted at a red light, engines idling like distant thunder. Cole took one step closer. Last warning, he said. Remove it yourself. Evelyn glanced down at the bronze medal resting above her heart. The ribbon was old, but carefully pressed. She remembered unwrapping it before dawn, smoothing the fabric on her kitchen table, and telling herself she would stay only 10 minutes. Leave flowers. Read one name. Go to work. Simple plans often failed when history arrived early. She lifted her chin slightly. No, it was not loud. It did not need to be. Somewhere behind the crowd, tires rolled slowly over curbside gravel. A dark government sedan had just pulled up beside the flags. The dark sedan came to a smooth stop beside the curb, its glossy surface reflecting rows of flags and the faces of people pretending not to stare. Two men in dress uniforms stepped out first, scanning the plaza with practiced calm, then moved to open the rear door. Officer Jason Cole glanced over his shoulder, annoyed more than concerned. In his mind, this was still a simple matter of compliance, a small public correction that would be forgotten by lunch. He did not notice how several veterans in the crowd had suddenly straightened their backs. Evelyn Carter did. She knew the sound of polished shoes on stone. She knew the measured pace of people trained to carry responsibility without displaying it. Her hand tightened around the paper bag of carnations. From the sedan emerged a broad-shouldered man in his 60s with silver at his temples and the posture of someone who had spent a lifetime standing where storms were strongest. His dark overcoat opened slightly as he walked, revealing ribbons and insignia pinned beneath. Conversations dissolved into whispers. Someone near the fountain murmured, "That is Admiral Marcus Reed." The name moved through the crowd like wind through dry leaves. Cole heard it too, but confidence kept him rooted. He turned back to Evelyn, as if refusing to acknowledge a shift in gravity. "This is your final instruction," he said. "Remove the medal or leave the event." Evelyn looked past him, eyes following the Admiral's approach, and for the first time that morning something changed in her expression. Not fear, not relief. Recognition mixed with old sorrow. It was the look people get when a door from another life quietly opens. Cole mistook her silence for surrender. "I am waiting," he said. The Admiral slowed 10 yards away. His gaze moved over the plaza, past the officer, past the crowd, and landed on Evelyn. He stopped so abruptly that one of the aides nearly took an extra step. For a long second he did not speak. His face, carved by years of command, softened into disbelief. Evelyn lowered her eyes briefly, almost embarrassed by being seen. The wind tugged at the ribbon on her chest. Cole followed the Admiral's line of sight and finally understood that the room he thought he controlled no longer existed. Still, pride is slow to surrender. "Sir," Cole called out, stepping forward. "Official matter. This woman is wearing unauthorized military decoration." Several people winced at the phrase. The Admiral did not answer him. He kept walking until he stood directly in front of Evelyn. close enough to see the small crease where the medal's ribbon had been stored too long in a drawer. His eyes glistened, though his voice, when it came, remained steady. "Petty Officer Carter," he said softly. A hush fell so complete that the fountain seemed louder than before. Evelyn gave the smallest nod. "It has been a long time, Admiral." Cole blinked. The title struck him harder than any reprimand could have. He looked from one face to the other, trying to rearrange reality into something that made sense. The old Marine with the cane smiled without humor. A woman near the back covered her mouth. The little boy holding his grandfather's hand whispered, "Who is she?" No one answered. They were all waiting. The Admiral removed his gloves with deliberate care, tucked them beneath one arm, then stepped back exactly 2 paces. His shoes clicked against the stone. Every veteran in the plaza knew what that distance meant. Cole did not, but he felt it. Evelyn stood motionless, carnations at her side, coat moving gently in the breeze. The Admiral drew a slow breath, shoulders rising once, then came sharply to attention. Admiral Marcus Reed raised his right hand in a crisp salute so precise it seemed to cut the morning air in half. The movement was immediate, instinctive, and full of a respect no speech could improve. Every veteran in the plaza recognized it at once and answered in their own way. Some stood straighter. Some removed caps and placed them over their hearts. One man in a wheelchair lifted trembling fingers to his brow. The old Marine with the cane came to attention despite the pain it clearly cost him. Officer Jason Cole remained frozen where he stood, hands still near his duty belt, face draining of color one realization at a time. Evelyn Carter looked almost uncomfortable under the sudden weight of attention. She shifted the carnations to her other hand and spoke quietly. "You do not need to do that, sir." The Admiral kept the salute for another long second before lowering it with care. "Yes," he said, voice low and firm. "I do." He studied her face as if measuring the years that had passed since he last saw it under very different skies. "I searched for you after I made captain." Evelyn gave a small shrug. "I moved." Life kept moving too. There was no bitterness in her words, only fact. Reed nodded once, accepting the rebuke hidden inside the simplicity of that truth. He turned slowly toward the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, projecting with the effortless authority of a man used to being heard. "This woman is Petty Officer Evelyn Carter, United States Navy corpsman, retired." Murmurs rippled outward. Phones lowered. Eyes widened. Cole opened his mouth, then closed it again. The title he had dismissed now stood taller than his assumptions. Reed continued, 36 years ago, during an evacuation operation overseas, I was 19 years old, bleeding, frightened, and certain I would not see another sunrise. She crossed open ground twice to reach men who outranked her and men who did not. She treated all of us the same." Evelyn's jaw tightened slightly, the way people do when memories arrive uninvited. "Admiral," she said softly, "that was a long time ago." "Not to me," he answered. The plaza had become utterly still. Even traffic on the street beyond seemed muted by the moment. Reed looked directly at Officer Cole. "Now." The officer straightened reflexively, but there was nowhere to hide from the calm disappointment in the Admiral's eyes. "You called her unauthorized," Reed said. "You were wrong." Cole swallowed hard. "Sir, I was enforcing." Reed lifted one hand, not sharply, but enough to stop the sentence where it stood. "Enforcement without judgment becomes humiliation." The words landed heavier than anger ever could. Cole's shoulders lowered a fraction. He glanced at Evelyn, then at the medal he had tried to remove. The ribbon fluttered gently against her coat. Reed stepped aside and motioned toward the granite memorial wall. "Do you know why she is here?" he asked. Cole said nothing. "Because one of the names on that wall belongs to the man who shielded her while she treated the rest of us. She comes every year with flowers." Evelyn lowered her eyes. The carnations rustled softly in the paper bag. A woman in the crowd began to cry quietly. The little boy squeezed his grandfather's hand tighter. Cole looked as though the stone beneath him had shifted. "I did not know," he said at last. "No," Reed replied. "You did not ask." The wind moved through the flags again, slower now, almost gentle. Evelyn took a breath and started toward the memorial wall. The crowd parted before she reached them, opening a clear path without being told. She walked with the measured pace of someone who had carried grief long enough to know it does not hurry for anyone. Evelyn Carter stopped before the black granite wall, where hundreds of names caught the pale morning light like silver threads. She set the paper bag carefully on the ground, reached inside, and removed 3 carnations, each stem wrapped in a damp paper towel to keep them fresh through the bus ride across town. The crowd remained several yards behind her, no one speaking above a whisper now. Admiral Marcus Reed stood with hands clasped behind his back. Officer Jason Cole stayed farther off, suddenly unsure where to place himself in a world that had rearranged itself without permission. Evelyn traced one engraved name with the tips of 2 fingers. Her touch was slow, practiced, intimate in the quiet way grief becomes after enough years. Samuel Turner, she said softly. The little boy in the crowd leaned toward his grandfather. Was he family? He whispered. The old Marine answered without taking his eyes off Evelyn. Sometimes family is who stayed. Evelyn laid the first carnation beneath the name, then a second beneath another farther down the panel. She paused before placing the third. Reed stepped closer, stopping respectfully behind her shoulder. I remember Turner, he said. He told jokes no one laughed at until 10 minutes later. For the first time that morning, a small smile touched Evelyn's face. That is because they were terrible jokes, she said. A few people chuckled softly, relieved to hear warmth return to the air. She placed the third carnation and straightened. He knew they were terrible. That was the point. Reed exhaled through a smile of his own. He spoke about you often. Evelyn looked back at the names. Then he exaggerated. No, Reed said. He said you were the bravest person he knew. The smile faded from her lips, replaced by something older and harder to carry. Bravery is usually what other people call it when they did not have to be there. The words settled over the plaza like falling snow. Cole lowered his head. He had spent years thinking courage looked loud, forceful, visible. He had never considered that courage might arrive quietly on a city bus carrying flowers in a paper bag. A reporter near the curb slowly tucked away her microphone. This no longer felt like a story to interrupt. Reed glanced toward Cole, then back to Evelyn. There is something I should have said years ago, he said. After we came home, medals were handed out in polished rooms. Promotions were signed. Names were remembered selectively. Yours should have been spoken more loudly than mine. Evelyn folded the empty bag with careful hands. That was the system. And systems are built by people, Reed replied. Which means people can fail. His gaze shifted briefly toward the officer. Cole took one hesitant step forward. Miss Carter, he said, voice strained by humility he had never practiced in public. I judged you before I knew anything about you. I was wrong. Several phones rose again, but no one recorded. Some moments asked to be witnessed, not captured. Evelyn turned to face him fully. Her expression held no triumph, only measured fatigue. You were wrong before you met me, she said. That is the part you need to fix. Cole swallowed and nodded once. The answer was sharper than anger because it was true. Reed looked at Evelyn with unmistakable respect. There is a luncheon after the ceremony, he said. State officials, veterans, press. They should hear your story. Evelyn glanced at the hospital badge still clipped inside her handbag. I start my shift at noon. Reed blinked, then laughed softly in disbelief. You are still going to work? Patients still need clean rooms, she said. Grief and honor do not stop spills. The old Marine tapped his cane against the stone and smiled wide enough to show missing teeth. The crowd laughed gently with him. Evelyn picked up the folded paper bag, gave the wall one last look, and started walking toward the bus stop as flags moved above her in the wind. The city bus arrived with a sigh of brakes and a hiss of kneeling hydraulics, lowering itself toward the curb as if even machinery understood respect. Evelyn Carter stepped aboard with the same quiet efficiency she used for everything else, tapping her fare card once and nodding to the driver. Morning, Miss Evelyn, he said, then looked past her toward the crowd still gathered across the street. Everything all right? She adjusted the strap of her handbag and gave him a small smile. It is now. She moved to the third row and sat by the window, paper bag folded neatly in her lap. Outside, the Memorial Plaza remained suspended in an unusual stillness. Admiral Marcus Reed stood near the granite wall speaking softly with several veterans, but his eyes followed the bus until the doors closed. Officer Jason Cole remained on the sidewalk, hat in hand, no longer certain whether to return to duty or remain where he had been corrected. The bus pulled away from the curb, tires whispering over damp pavement. Buildings slid past in slow gray reflections. Evelyn rested one hand over the metal pin to her coat, not protectively now, but thoughtfully. 30 years in a drawer and one morning in the light had somehow made it heavier. At the next stop, an elderly woman carrying grocery bags boarded and recognized her immediately from the plaza. "Honey," she said, settling into the seat across the aisle. That was something. Evelyn looked out the window. It was a long morning. The woman smiled. "No, dear. It was a short truth." The bus continued downtown through blocks of brick storefronts, coffee shops, and narrow streets where office workers hurried with phones in hand and shoulders raised against the cold. None of them knew the woman by the window had become the center of a silence larger than headlines. Evelyn preferred it that way. At a red light, she caught her reflection in the glass. Gray beginning at the temples, fine lines around the eyes, a metal shining where it had no intention of hiding anymore. She remembered the younger version of herself who once stood in tropical heat with medical gloves on and fear tucked behind her ribs. That young woman would not have believed this older one spent mornings replacing trash liners and polishing hallway rails. Then again, youth rarely understands how honorable ordinary endurance can be. Her phone vibrated inside her bag. She rarely received calls before noon. The screen showed an unknown number. "Hello. Miss Carter," said a clear female voice. "This is Denise Warren from City General Hospital Administration. We just saw the footage from the memorial. Are you all right?" Evelyn blinked. "I'm on my way in now." "Please do not rush," Denise said quickly. "The chief operating officer would like to meet with you when you arrive." Evelyn frowned gently. "Have I done something wrong?" There was a pause, then a soft laugh. "No, ma'am. Quite the opposite." The line ended. Evelyn slipped the phone back into her bag and stared at the passing streets. She had spent years trying not to be noticed. It was strange how exhausting attention could feel. Across town, on the plaza steps, Officer Cole finally approached Admiral Reed. "Sir," he said quietly, "how do I fix something like that?" Reed looked toward the disappearing bus route before answering. "You start by learning that respect is not something you grant after credentials. It is where you begin." Cole lowered his eyes. Reed adjusted his gloves and added, "Then you spend a long time proving you learned it." Back on the bus, the driver called out her stop. Evelyn rose, smoothed her coat, and stepped into the aisle. A young man near the rear stood quickly to let her pass. "Thank you for your service," he said awkwardly, as if testing words he had never used sincerely before. Evelyn paused, surprised more by the effort than the phrase. She nodded once. "Thank you for noticing." Then she stepped down onto the sidewalk and walked toward the hospital entrance as the metal caught the first full burst of noon sunlight. Evelyn Carter entered City General Hospital through the employee doors beside the loading dock, where the scent of rain-soaked concrete mixed with industrial detergent and warm air from the laundry vents. It was the entrance she had used for 11 years, the one with chipped paint on the handrail and a vending machine that only accepted exact change. Usually no one looked twice when she walked in. Today 3 nurses at the time clock turned at once. One of them covered her mouth. Another whispered, "That is her." Evelyn gave the same polite nod she gave every morning and clipped her badge to her coat pocket. The metal remained pinned above it, bronze catching the fluorescent light in small flashes as she moved. In the locker room, her friend Teresa from Environmental Services stood waiting with arms crossed and eyes wide. "Girl," Teresa said, "you went viral before lunch." Evelyn sighed softly. "I was hoping for a quieter Tuesday." Teresa laughed so hard she had to lean against a locker. Too late for that. She held up her phone. Every local station showed the Memorial Plaza. The frozen frame on screen captured Admiral Marcus Reed saluting while Officer Jason Cole stood in stunned silence nearby. Comments scrolled beneath like rushing water. "Hero. Shameful treatment. Who is she?" Evelyn gently lowered the phone. "People move fast," she said. "They do not always stay." Teresa's smile softened. "Maybe some truths do." A page came over the overhead speaker, asking for Miss Carter to report to Administration Suite B. That had never happened in 11 years. Evelyn smoothed her coat, checked that the carnation's water stains had not marked the fabric, and walked upstairs past polished corridors where patients, visitors, and staff now recognized her one by one. Some smiled, some nodded. One young orderly stepped aside and opened a door for her as if ceremony had followed her into the building. Suite B was carpeted thick enough to silence footsteps. Framed awards lined the walls. A receptionist rose the moment Evelyn approached. "Miss Carter, they are waiting for you." Inside the conference room sat Denise Warren from administration, the hospital chief operating officer Martin Hale, and to Evelyn's surprise, Admiral Reed near the far window, holding a paper cup of coffee. He turned when she entered and smiled with visible relief. "I hoped I was not too late." Evelyn stopped short. "How did you get here before me?" "Government plates help with traffic," he said. Martin Hale stood quickly and extended both hands. "Miss Carter, I owe you an apology." Evelyn did not take the hands immediately. "For what?" Hale swallowed. "For not knowing who has been helping hold this place together." Denise slid a folder across the table. Inside were commendations from nurses, handwritten notes from families, and incident reports describing moments Evelyn had quietly handled for years. A frightened veteran calmed during a panic episode because she sat beside him until sunrise. A child with autism soothed by the rhythm of her humming while waiting for surgery. A widow who nearly fainted in the hallway and was steadied by Evelyn before anyone else noticed. Martin looked ashamed. "We review budgets, metrics, staffing charts. Somehow we missed the person everyone already trusted." Evelyn looked through the pages slowly, almost embarrassed by praise collected without her consent. "I was doing my job," she said. Admiral Reed set down his coffee. "That sentence has hidden many heroes." Denise leaned forward. "We would like to offer you a new role. Patient Support Coordinator for Veterans and Trauma Families. Full benefits, salary increase. Training support, your own office if you want one." Evelyn blinked once, then again. "An office?" Teresa would have laughed for an hour at that. Martin nodded eagerly. "And if you prefer no office, we can discuss that too." For the first time all morning, Evelyn laughed. It was warm, low, surprised laughter that changed the room more than authority ever had. She glanced at the medal, then at Reed. "I came in expecting to mop room 314. Reed smiled. "Sometimes history clocks in before the shift begins." Outside the conference room window, sunlight spread across the city rooftops while downstairs nurses, patients, and janitors waited to see what Miss Evelyn would choose. Evelyn Carter closed the folder and rested both hands on it for a moment, as if weighing paper against years. The conference room had gone still again. That same kind of stillness that seemed to follow truth wherever it entered. Martin Hale waited with the nervous posture of a man and used to hearing no. Denise Warren watched with hopeful patience. Admiral Marcus Reed stood by the window, arms folded lightly, saying nothing. He knew some decisions deserved silence around them. Evelyn looked at the polished table, then at her own hands. The knuckles were lined now. The skin at the fingertips had been roughened by bleach, cold water, and years of pushing carts through long corridors before sunrise. Those hands had carried stretchers, folded blankets, steadied strangers, and wiped tears no report had ever recorded. "I appreciate the offer," she said at last. Martin leaned forward too quickly. "Then you accept?" Evelyn lifted one eyebrow, and the room softened with restrained smiles. "I said I appreciate it." Even Reed laughed quietly at that. She continued, "I will accept one condition." Martin nodded at once. "Anything reasonable?" "That depends who you ask," Evelyn replied. She opened the folder again and slid 3 pages out. "Teresa Johnson in Environmental Services has trained half your overnight staff for 6 years and still makes less than new hires. Mr. Alvarez in Transport works double shifts because you never replaced 2 positions. Mrs. Linda Cho in Laundry paid for her own back brace last winter." Martin's face changed one fact at a time. Denise lowered her eyes, already recognizing the names. "If this hospital suddenly sees me," Evelyn said, voice calm and clear, "then it should learn to see the people standing beside me too." No one spoke for several seconds. Reed's expression held unmistakable admiration. Martin finally cleared his throat. "We can review compensation structures today," Evelyn said gently. "Not review. Begin." He nodded, smaller now than when the meeting started. "Yes, ma'am." Denise smiled despite herself. "Anything else?" Evelyn considered it. "No office." Martin blinked. "You do not want one?" "I do not need walls to help people." She tapped the folder. "Use the space for a family waiting room with decent chairs and working coffee." Reed looked out the window to hide a grin. "That sounds like an order," he said. "It is a suggestion," Evelyn answered. "The strongest kind," Reed replied. A knock came at the door. The receptionist entered, flustered but smiling. Miss Carter, there are staff members gathering in the lobby. They asked if you might come downstairs. Evelyn sighed softly. I was hoping to start work. Teresa's voice carried from the hallway before anyone could answer. Too late, hero. Laughter rolled through the room. Minutes later, the elevator doors opened onto the main lobby, and Evelyn stopped short. Nurses lined one side, near the information desk. Janitors in gray uniforms lined the other. Transport aides, receptionists, doctors, volunteers, cafeteria workers, and patients able to stand had formed a wide aisle stretching to the entrance doors. No banner. No cameras inside. Just people. Teresa stood front row with a mop handle like a ceremonial staff. Move those feet, Miss Carter, she called. Some of us skipped break for this. Evelyn shook her head, smiling in disbelief, then began walking forward. As she passed, people applauded softly at first, then louder, then with the kind of rhythm that comes when gratitude has been waiting years for permission. Some reached out to touch her sleeve. Others simply nodded with wet eyes. At the far end stood Officer Jason Cole in plain clothes, hat in both hands. He had come alone. When Evelyn reached him, he spoke quietly enough that only she heard. I requested community reassignment and bias training this afternoon. It should have happened long before today. Evelyn studied him, then gave a single nod. Good. Make sure it changes someone besides you. He stepped aside. The lobby doors opened, sunlight pouring across the tile floor in a bright path that led straight ahead. Evelyn walked into it while the applause followed behind her like rain turning warm. By late afternoon, the hospital had settled back into its ordinary rhythm, the kind built from rolling carts, elevator chimes, low voices, and shoes moving quickly across polished floors. Extraordinary moments rarely stay loud for long. They sink into routine, where their real work begins. Evelyn Carter preferred that. She had changed into fresh gloves, tied on her navy housekeeping apron, and was pushing a supply cart down the fourth-floor corridor as sunlight stretched in long gold rectangles across the tile. Patients napped behind half-closed doors. Televisions murmured game shows and weather reports. Somewhere a nurse laughed softly at a joke she needed after a hard shift. Evelyn stopped outside room 418 and knocked gently before entering. Inside, an older veteran sat by the window with an oxygen line beneath his nose and a folded newspaper in his lap. The front page showed a photograph from the Memorial Plaza. Admiral Marcus Reed saluting. A woman in a navy coat facing him. The headline was large. The man tapped the paper. That you? Evelyn checked the trash liner before answering. Looks like me. He studied her, then smiled. Knew I recognized that walk. She laughed under her breath. Most people know me by the mop bucket. Nothing wrong with that, he said. World would stink without honest work. True enough. She straightened the blanket at the foot of his bed and refilled the water pitcher. He watched every movement with the careful attention of someone measuring character through habits, not speeches. I saw what happened this morning, he said. You could have humiliated that officer back. Evelyn adjusted the blinds so the sunlight no longer hit his eyes. Would that have helped him learn? The man considered this, then slowly shook his head. No, ma'am. Then there is your answer. She started toward the door when he spoke again. Miss Carter, yes. Thank you for wearing it. Her hand touched the metal pinned above her apron. It looked unusual there among disinfectant wipes and supply keys, but somehow more correct than ever. Thank you for seeing it, she replied. In the hallway, Teresa Johnson leaned against the cart with theatrical impatience. You know you are impossible now, right? Evelyn frowned playfully. I was impossible before breakfast. Teresa grinned. Fair point. She handed over a clipboard. New staffing notices were posted. Wage increases approved for environmental services, transport, and laundry effective next pay period. Family waiting room renovation beginning next month. Evelyn read the page once, then handed it back. Fast work. Teresa shrugged. Funny how quickly people move when cameras remind them they have legs. They walked together toward the elevators, pushing the cart between them. On the ground floor, Martin Hale stood in shirt sleeves carrying 2 boxes of donated recliners toward the old storage room that would become the waiting lounge. Denise Warren followed with paint samples. Neither saw Evelyn pass, which pleased her immensely. Outside the hospital entrance, evening settled over the city in cool blue layers. Commuters hurried home, Ambulance lights glowed silently at the curb. Across the street, Officer Jason Cole was helping an elderly man